Welcome to the Lair, a place where interesting people you may know tell you things you didn't. So grab a chair and your favorite vice and get comfortable. There are no rules in the Lair, but there is Laura Babcock. You know her from TV, and she is not into media monogamy. Let's find out who else is in the Lair.
So we're still kind of reeling here from the announcement that one of the mayoral candidates for the 2014 election decided to announce here in the Laircast. So we had a lot of talk around that. And there was an opportunity for the audience to instantaneously, in Laircast style, challenge Brian McHattie on his announcement, demand his policy positions on things. One of the challengers that took the opportunity, because it was one of those moments where you just dive in, was Justin. And Justin, you really came on my radar with your Yes We Can, and I met you during the TIP documentary, but then you did an amazing job presenting to council. I've never seen so much, social media praise for a delegation to council of all things. No, it really is impressive. And you had the opportunity with Brian sitting here to challenge Brian on one of his sacred cows, which is his Vision 2020. And, you and me piggybacking on your point, we kind of said, long-term strategy versus short-term tactical wins, stop talking long-term, let's get some stuff done. I'm paraphrasing our discussion with Brian, but you impressed me because you were living in Toronto recently. You're back in Hamilton, and you've already moved some of the, you've already moved us down the field. So just tell me sort of where you're at from your perspective on all this stuff.
Yeah, well, so like you said, I come from, I'm actually born and raised out in Alberta, so.
Oh, I didn't know that, okay.
Yeah, I'm an Alberta boy.
Interesting.
So I moved to Toronto in 2007. Okay. And I lived there for 4 years, and then I moved to Hamilton, and completely fell in love with the city. But some of the things that I saw in the city that I saw as our biggest challenges were the same kind of things that Keenan Loomis wrote about in his recent editorial, where he said that our transportation system is the thing that's holding us back the most here in the city of Hamilton, and I couldn't agree with that more. I'm a person that has seen the benefit of building a community where it's a human scale community, right. And here in Hamilton we have a lot of networks that are not human scale at all. They're designed specifically to be moved through as quickly as possible with a car, and not really have any time spent in them. And so that was kind of my inspiration for Yes We Can. I was approached by a couple of my colleagues, Leisha Knopf and Kevin Makins. They approached me. We met in March of this year, okay. And they were looking for someone that knew the policy side of stuff, and that's the world I live in. So, but from March to your council presentation in the beginning of September, was it end of August? March to September, yeah.
Now there's bike lanes on Cannon, a major city investment, and a positive campaign. What do you think was its success factor? Well,
I think the biggest thing that we did, the three things that we did was, number one, we stayed relentlessly positive. Like you said, we were not talking about let's take things away from cars. We wanted to give people transportation choice back. Right. Make the street part of the community rather than something that just moves people through it. We did our research, quite frankly. I mean, that's the biggest thing is we knew we had numbers on our side. We knew we had data on our side, and we knew we had the communities on our side. And then the third thing was set a timeline that was short and that was achievable.
Isn't that the ticket?
It is, because people don't want to hear about 20-year plans that may or may not be achieved while they still live in the city. They want to see something go on the ground now.
That's why tactical urbanism is getting the traction that it is, because, and it's not, I don't think it's just impatience, just because we're an immediate gratification culture. I think it's because of disillusionment from years and years of long-term management, 80s strat plan stuff. That's great. I do strat plans for my clients, but they're all tactically oriented. Yeah. because if you can't have timelines and tactics, the plan is just annoying. And I think, and Vision 2020, I was on some of those Vision 2020 groups that I don't know, marked up with smiley faces, the different, I don't even remember. All I know is even then I looked at the exercises being really, I like the triple bottom line theory behind it, but it doesn't, does anyone in Hamilton, if they were asked, tell me what Vision 2020 is, since we're only 5 years away from it, can anyone answer the question other than Brian McCaddy and a few others?
Yeah, probably not.
And yet, how many people know that Cannon Street is now getting bike lanes?
Yeah.
And that there's signage going up on the city gateways because, you and I set short little timelines, stayed relentlessly positive. I love that. Had some data to support our argument, and that's it.
Yeah.
So given that formula has worked with you and with myself and with other people in recent history, do you think that signals a change in the way that politics is going to be done going forward?
I think it signals I think there's a very real change taking place at City Hall. I think, we were kind of talking about it earlier today about how the Dialogue Partners fiasco was it was almost kind of a blessing in disguise for movements like Yes We Can, and because it really woke the city up to the power of social media.
It really did.
And it wasn't just oh, there's a bunch of these weirdos on Twitter. What's the Twitter machine?
Right.
It was.
Although some councillors were still talking about it like that.
Yeah.
Like it was some homogeneous blob of, basement underwear wearing people or whatever it is that I clearly am not. Right?
We're all wearing pants here today, so.
It's true. I do wear my underwear in the basement occasionally, but not when I'm working.
But and so to my mind, that really signaled the start of the shift. But when a group like Yes We Can has an opportunity to sit down with the director of corporate assets, that wouldn't have happened 2 years ago.
Right.
We wouldn't be sitting down with a traffic engineer.
So it's fear. It's absolute unmitigated fear of the unknown. That's no, it's true. No. But this is the thing. But this is why that name of that company I shall never mention, that had that scandal. That's what it did. Was it showed council that there is a force greater than the people who call them, or the people they run into on the weekends. That there is a force that when angry enough and mobilized enough, and it has to be organic, right? You cannot move, I said that to council last week when Councillor Farr said, can you explain to us the impact social media has had on the Time for Sign campaign? And I said, well, I can't create a hashtag. I created one technically, but I can't make it come alive.
Yeah.
It has to have its own, people have to have their own sense of frustration, their own sense of buy-in, their own sense of epiphany, their own sense of mobilization. And that is something that for a traditional politician, that's terrifying. And so I think that what that scandal did was it made council suddenly aware that, wait a second, the people can mobilize around our radar. And some of them quickly got on the radar of social media, and a number of other ones are afraid of it. So for you to get the kind of access that you're talking about, relatively new to Hamilton, quick timelines, major product, major money, is because they fear what will happen if they don't.
I don't know if I think that at the end of the day, as far as fearing what will happen if they don't, I think at the end of the day, I think that when you're talking about municipal governance, really we're in the age of trying to do as much as we can with as little as we can, right?
Right.
We're trying to do more with less. And at the end of the day, we've got these strips of asphalt that are carrying far fewer vehicles than they should be carrying.
Right.
We're paying massive amounts of maintenance costs, massive amounts of infrastructure deficits are being built up. And really the easiest way to start using those things to start moving more people back and forth rather than just vehicles is to start normalizing the type of infrastructure that we're building to make sense to give people that choice back.
Oh, I agree with you.
And so
But do you think the
even
access
fiscal conservatives have a hard time arguing against something like what we did on Cannon Street.
But do you think that you got the access that you got and the timeline that you got devoid of the social media potential of your campaign? Or simply the grassroots mobilization of your campaign? I mean, those orange shirts were everywhere.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
Go ahead, Lord. Anytime.
If I may.
Go ahead.
A little bird told me, and first of all, what was the ask for the Cannon project in terms of dollars?
His birds worry me. They're usually like big death hawks.
As far as I know,
What's it going to cost to do
A
that?
giant.
the staff estimates have been 600,000 to 800,000.
Okay. And in the world of why would I rail against this, that screams a giant fuck all for a budgetary
Oh,
item,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the three camps of I love it, I don't care about it, and I don't love it at all because it doesn't speak to my constituency. Councillors, here's the real victory in what I understood took place. We're under the impression of if they voted against this and stood up against it, they would be chastised, berated, and otherwise by the urbanist movement
Which concretes where?
downtown.
And on social media is my point, right?
Correct.
That's my point.
But I don't think for a second that that should be anything other than an understanding of exactly what it was. Few puny dollars and councillors chickening out on their own beliefs for a fuck it, it's not worth the headache. No, and I don't want to take
that's
away your
perfect.
victory, and I'm not belittling your victory
No, no.
because your tie-in to social media is what caused that. If there was another zero attached to your ask,
Oh, yeah.
then we've got a different level of, but I think we should understand for what it is.
And that, at the end of the day, that's your point is actually
No
very well taken.
councillors are going to publicly admit that. Several would to private ears.
Yeah.
That's
No,
why
you're.
we have the Lair cast and you on your fifth beer. You're admitting it for them, which is why we love to capture this stuff.
No, your point is actually very well taken. I mean, like this, in terms of budgetary ask, was really a drop in the bucket. In terms of the community support that we got was massive.
How much
And
did you
in terms
ask?
Of like, if, yeah, and in terms of like if a counselor stood up against it, despite the fact that we had gone in there and presented them with over 2,000 signatures. We presented them with facts that showed that street is well beyond, stupidly overbuilt. We presented them with the fact that every single community association across the entire strip of streets.
Okay, but
So
there are
they would have been. You're right.
There are
Your point is
councillors
well
who
made.
could have voted against it because of the overall principle of the war on the vehicle
Yeah.
that is taking place. Forget Cannon Street per se. It's their constituents can't take public transit. Their constituents own 2 cars in their driveway. And this is a waste of time, money, and effort for the people that voted for them.
Right, but here's the point that I would make to those constituents is that to every single person who owns 2 cars, who can't take public transit, who has to drive downtown, the bike in front of you is the car that isn't. Every single person that gets on a bike who doesn't take their car isn't competing for parking spots, isn't competing for spaces on the road. Are you kidding me?
You are making an assumption
No, I
that
am
there are
not.
bike riders who are leaving their car behind.
Yes, I am. I am
And I
absolutely.
agree that there are some, but there is no way that that is universal. There's an
Lauren,
awful lot
can
of
I-
bike
can I-
riders.
Can I tell you?
who
Can I
don't
tell
have a
you
car.
something? You know what? Can I tell you something? So here's how cycling works across North America. You get in or you get out what you put into it. And here in Hamilton, in the area that we have downtown, where it is the area where it is the biggest area of growth for cycling, the biggest area where people could potentially live within 5 kilometers of their workplace, so within a 20-minute bike ride.
Okay.
The only piece of cycling infrastructure we currently have to get across the lower city is Barton Street. Do you know what there is on Barton Street? Nothing. Do you know what Barton Street is on the cycling map? Barton Street is a yellow line with orange dash lines. You know what the yellow line means? Unsigned suggested bike route. You know what the orange dash lines mean? High volume, narrow lanes. That is our suggested bike route across town. You get out what you put in.
Let me tell you a story about Indianapolis, Indiana. What's the first thing you think of?
I hear politician. Let me tell you a story.
What's the first thing you think of?
And then the little old lady I
The
met.
Indianapolis 500, exactly. Car-based to the max. Indianapolis installed what's called the Cultural Trail, a 12.5 kilometer long cycling piece of infrastructure. It connects 5 of their cultural hub neighborhoods. Indianapolis in the last 10 years has seen the number of cyclists on their roads triple. We're talking, if that kind of numbers happened in Hamilton, we are talking 15,000 cyclists per day. 15,000 vehicles every day being taken off the road.
My point was that if I were the Ward 15 councillor, and the only bike riding that is going on is recreational, and there's a pissful of it in Ward 15, no doubt about it, but nobody is taking their bike on the 403 to come to work to Hamilton. They're not.
No, you're out. No, because it's illegal.
Let's hope that's the reason.
Yeah, no, there's no bikes allowed on 400
That
series highways.
it remains an urbanist issue, and urbanist councillors should look after that. I'm suggesting that that doesn't resonate as a strong issue to people who cannot commute, and that we're not all able to get along on a bike. Especially, I'd like to see, should Hamilton ever have a winter again, because, no, it's a moot argument for the last couple of years, but bike lanes don't have a whole lot of activity when they're covered in snow.
Well, it depends very highly on how the
Come
clear.
on, couriers are the only-
Madison, Wisconsin, my friend. Madison, Wisconsin has harsher winters than we do, and guess what? They have a better clearing schedule than we do. They have a clearing schedule that says here's what they do. When they go out, Madison, Wisconsin, when they go out, they do highways, arterial roads, major bike routes. Those are the top 3 things they do. Then they start doing smaller streets and neighborhood streets. So the third thing that gets cleared after arterial roads is the major bike routes. And guess what? They're still seeing 3 to 4% of their population cycle every single day in the winter. 3 to 4%. Again, let me put that in perspective. If we're seeing that in Hamilton, that's 15 to 20,000 people every day. And this is in a place that has harsher winters than us. This is the thing where you get the city you plan for. And if you plan a city where you're saying, we aren't going to clear these bike routes because why would we clear them? No one's going to ride on them. Of course no one's going to ride on them if you don't clear them. If you get out there and you start clearing them and you start making the very clear distinction that we're trying to accommodate people that are taking that choice to cycle year-round, people will start to do it because it's a much cheaper option. The CAA has come up with their numbers, $8,000 to $10,000 a year to own and operate a vehicle in Ontario.
Let me do an unscientific poll. Is there anyone in this room who currently drives a vehicle that would switch to a bike based on this argument? Put up your hands.
I have switched to a bike.
You've switched to a bike? Well, you're a fitness trainer, for God's sakes. Of course you have. Anybody else? You drive a smart car. Would you ride a bike, Graham?
No, I'm too old and too fat.
What about you, Alex? Would you ride a bike?
You know, I haven't really ridden a bike since I was 17. Well, I've done it twice since I was 17.
Does this make you want to?
Yeah, it does.
It's a very professorial thing to do, isn't it?
I just have always lived in places that required a car.
Right.
You know, I did too, Alex. I'm new to this. I told you I grew up in Alberta.
Yeah, in Alberta, yeah.
And like as soon as I turned 16, it was just like everything else went out the window. My 1984 Fifth Avenue, if I couldn't see it from out my front door, I was taking my 84 Fifth Ave. That thing was like driving a coach. I tell you, it was awesome. So it was great. But like you know, at the end of the day, like when I moved to Toronto, I was 23 years old. I got tired of waiting for the TTC, and so I bought myself a bike at 23. Hadn't been on a bike since I was 12 years old. And those are the kind of people.
Well, you know what, listening to you, because you know what, I think to myself, well, maybe when the kids can ride their own bike and I'm not being soccer mom and dance mom and you know driving around with the kids in the back seat, the argument starts to make me want to do it because it's not your argument's a great one, but it's that meme on that social media meme where it says, you know, the car costs a lot of money, makes you fat. The bike costs nothing, makes you skinny. It's kind of hard to argue with that meme, right? Sorry, go ahead, Alex. Just one second.
There are other pieces to it too. You know, it's a seductive vision of the city of the future. It's this quiet place where where you know, you aren't overwhelmed by road noise and by engine noise, where you know, there aren't horns tooting all the time, where the air isn't you know, sort of really stinky and.
Although I will say,
hard-
I
hard
was
to
in
breathe.
Tokyo, and
Yeah.
the bike traffic, it's not stinky per se, but it is loud, and the horns are loud, right? You
Sure.
get enough bikes out there, you got the chaos.
Yeah, not on the same level though. It's a
No,
different.
it's true. It's a
yeah,
different
it's
kind
human.
of. It's a
It's
different
human
kind
noise.
of. Yeah, it's a different kind of chaos.
Yeah.
Rectify this for me, if you would. So, our beloved and new farmers market is suggesting that they're dying, partially due to design, but mostly due to that they don't validate parking. And their thought is that Nations, the grocery store, which does validate parking, is slaughtering them because what has happened, and this is what doesn't make sense to me, the Hamilton Farmers Market should be bike riders galore, except that they are suggesting, and they would know better than anybody else would know about what's hurting them, that they aren't being able to appeal. I'm saying ground zero of the bike world is now saying we're getting fucked by a lack of suitability to cars. I have a simple mind. I find that very confusing.
Well, I think that at the end of the day, what we're all kind of talking about is we're not necessarily talking about, cyclist cars. We're talking about moving people and moving people effectively. And at the end of the day, like the farmers market can't just cater to that small catchment area, where, especially in that area, where if you want to try and ride your bike to the farmers market, you really have to be someone like me. Because you have to be confident enough to ride in mixed traffic. Because other than the bike lane that starts on York, that starts at Hess and ends at Wilson, so unless you magically teleport in at Hess and then teleport out at James rather, you're riding in mixed traffic, which for someone like me who's a confident, experienced cyclist, no problem, but for other cyclists, it is a big problem. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like I honestly, to be perfectly honest with you, I think that the farmers, to have the Nations there that is able to validate parking and have the farmers market right there and not give them that same option, I think that's brutal. I can't believe that they do that, like from a policy standpoint.
You're also stretching the fact that the market had troubles before Nations even opened. There's a lot of complexity.
There's tons about the market. We'll get into it on tomorrow's O Show. We'll do a whole segment on the O Show tomorrow. But, I want to wrap this up just by a couple of things. Justin, thank you for showing how well it can be done and staying relentlessly positive, having facts on your side and setting short timelines. For razzle-dazzling council, I think gives a lot of people hope. The fact that you're recently new to Hamilton, you're from by way of Alberta and Toronto, I love that, right? Because, it just shows to me that one by one, we are changing this city. For all the talk we had tonight about politics and council and stuff, they are nothing compared to the work of a whole bunch of engaged citizens. They are our representatives. They're not the sum of everything we can do. So I love to hear stuff like that. And, will you get Lauren out of his massive, energy-sucking giant, way too big... No, but his truck is bigger than any human being's truck needs to be. He says he's a farmer, but really he's always driving it around town. Yeah, right. You won't get him out of that. You might get me on a bike, but point is, you got council to move and the city to do something, and that's laudable. And you showed up at how'd you like your first Laircast experience?
No, it was fun.
Kind of a weird vibe. Eh? Exactly.
No, it was good.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to have you here, and I shouldn't welcome you to Hamilton because it's not my job, but welcome to Hamilton.
I've been
Glad to
like
have you.
almost 3 years.
I know, but it's the first time you've been on my show, so hey!
And we know our new slogan,
What's that?
Hamilton.
Oh yeah, like heroin. Do you know what I love is that people who are going to listen to McCaddy's show now, right? Because like as Dr. Sevigny said, all the calm people have to listen to the Laircast now to dissect his narratives. They all have to start with 5 minutes of Carrie Gray talking about heroin. I love that shit.
Where's the Hamilton's gonna have t-shirts? Show your track marks with pride.
And then my best part was you talk about when I made the transition from Carrie over to him, and I'm like, so Carrie's like, I want you to run for mayor. I'm like, yeah, Brian, you're gonna run for mayor? And he's like, is that a real question? And I'm like, oh my God, he won. And I'm like, yeah. And like, he was waiting for the moment. It's pretty hilarious. Only in a Laircast could we bury the lead so far.
I think the bigger story of the night, though? Was
Yeah.
Harry breaking up with his girlfriend.
Oh, I didn't get that part. But.
Him and Mary Jane broke up.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know they were together for 32 years. He's been without her for 2 months, and he had an epiphany. Anyway, that's another story. Thank you for being here, Justin. And thanks everyone. Good night. Awesome.
Chats in the Lair is a Power Group production. Visit us at powergroup.ca or laircast.com, or check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.